Welcome to Ministers Talking a weekly program where Rev Briz and Rev Z and their guests chat about current affairs, world events, spiritual principles, and any old they want to talk about. Based on the New Thought philosophy and ancient wisdoms, Ministers Talking shares a visionary perspective of the evolving spiral called spiritual living. Join us each week as we explore the emerging paradigm of life on planet Earth and beyond.
And hello again, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Reverend David Alexander from Atlanta, Georgia over here.
And we're a couple of ministers talking shit today. This happens every Friday on New Thought Media Network, 7 a.m. Thank you for being up early. Or if you're on the East Coast, not quite so early. And thank you for being with us. Dr. David's been a guest on the program a few times. Rev Z is off doing a little bit of business and family travel again this weekend. He got real busy with travel this December. So we're having a great series of special guests. And this week, it's Reverend Dr. David. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's so great to be back. Really, really great. And looking forward to talking some shit.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the big shit story of the week is Brittney Griner is coming home. Now, we've been covering this story here on this program, folks, from when it very first started, and tied it all up in this war between Russia and, this aggression from Russia towards Ukraine. And in the early stages of that, in February, Brittney gets picked up at a Moscow airport with 0.57 grams of what they claim hashish oil in a vape cartridge. She has spent she's been in a Russian prison since that time, but is, as of this morning, back on American soil and at home in her wife's arms in Texas. Dr. David, give us a little of your perspective on this. How do you feel about all this?
Well, I'm thrilled, that she's home. I'm thrilled that the United States government and President Biden made it a priority to advocate and work for her release, as they have been doing, not only for her but for Paul and for any and all Americans who are wrongfully detained around the world. We don't know that's always happening because it's happening behind the scenes, but it's always a priority. But it just feels good to see the fruition of the work that's been happening, including my former governor from New Mexico, Bill Richardson, who's always been deeply involved in international affairs and hostage release situations. And so, I'm thrilled about it and been posting on social media. But what's been disappointing to me is to see the attempt to politicize and to talk about it as if there's some negative angle of this story, right? That I had a cousin on my Facebook feed who said, I'm glad for her, but disappointed that Paul is not included in the deal, and it's time to get a new president with who has better priorities or different priorities or something like that. And of course, myself and many other people just started kind of tearing into this perspective. And it's like, there is no downside to this moment. This is a win for all American citizens, regardless of how you voted, regardless of how you feel about this president or, any other issue, regardless of how you feel about, a small amount of hashish oil or any of those other things. This is not a moment to divide and say, yes, but he's military, or yes, but he's been there longer, or yes, but da-da-da. No, just stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah.
Stop it.
I agree. We have to celebrate when the law works.
Right.
Not that it ever doesn't work, but we have to celebrate when we see the wins. We have to celebrate when the things go the way we're looking for them to go. And I can't see how and I saw that happen too immediately, right?
Immediately.
There were even people that their post was, but what about Paul? And for those that maybe don't know, Paul Whelan is an American businessman. He was picked up in 4 years ago in 2018 on and charged with espionage. And what I've seen and what I've read is they're very different cases with very different people. And from the perspective of the Russian government, very different severities of the accused crime.
Right.
Brittany actually admitted that they were hers, that it was a mistake. It wasn't like she was trying to smuggle. And Paul has maintained his innocence all the way along. But what we do know is the American government hasn't given up on him either.
Absolutely. Yeah, obviously very different cases, and when you take a wider perspective and look at the kind of the psychological profile of Russian identity, it's a very difficult grip based on the accusation of espionage for them to let go of, for us to negotiate and pry the fingers off of Paul. For them, let's flip it around. Let's say there's somebody here in American custody who's accused of being a Russian spy. Regardless of any of the details of that, if we were to let them go, just as we were talking about, social media would blow up. It's like, what do you mean? You let a spy go? Right. And it doesn't matter whether, in this case for Russia, again, talking consciousness and mindset, it doesn't matter whether he's innocent or not. They have an identity, a psychological profile, a collective consciousness, if you will. And for them to say, we're going to let this person who was spying on us go back to America, it's not, frankly, very conceivable. Now I say that I don't mean that he won't ever come home, because negotiation is a political game, and I believe we'll find the right chips to play and get him home, and I pray for that. But we just have to remember that these were not apples to apples in terms of what that move would mean to Russian identity when they're in the midst of a war, right?
Yeah. I find it interesting. I have to believe that our Russian counterparts are also looking, and obviously looking at the optics of all of this, because they had an international arms dealer.
Right.
For us, we see Brittany as a symbol of the American dream. We see Brittany had immediately was identified as, because I believe she's an American and an athlete, that this is so much more important than anything, and that we're even willing to trade an international arms dealer who we had on a 25-year sentence for selling arms earmarked to kill Americans. It's we get into these things that, as you're saying, none of it's apples to apples.
Right.
And let's celebrate that Brittany's home, because now we can double down our efforts on bringing Paul Whelan home.
Absolutely. Exactly. And one of the points I made was that in Brittany's freedom, again, you have an athlete. She will continue to have a high profile, social media profile and persona in our world, and she will now be a lifelong, according to her own words, I'm not making this up, she will be a lifelong advocate for the release of Paul, for the release of any, wrongly imprisoned American citizen overseas. She will continue to be a voice and use her platform for those issues. So it's a huge win for everybody involved. And Paul's family acknowledged that. Brittany's family acknowledged their willingness and advocacy for this lifelong. And so to divide it, we talk about this all the time in terms of politics. We know that we're divided. We know that, there's a consciousness of us and them and all of that stuff that's battling out. This is not one where we need to make a division. It just isn't. And the people who are attempting to do that, frankly, I find it immoral. I find it absolutely immoral, and particularly people in political office from Washington who are doing this. This is not a moment to stand on and try to bolster your side of the political spectrum. This is a moment to stand under the banner of the United States of America and say, thank you, President Biden. That's it.
Yep. Amen. I'll do that. Thank you, President Biden.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. All right, let's switch tactics a little bit. I've got a very important and pressing question for you, because number one, you're in Georgia. Georgia has definitely been in the spotlight this past week, at least as far as politics. So I got to ask, are you more of a vampire guy or more of a werewolf guy?
Oh my goodness. Well,
I've been told that werewolves are pretty cool.
Right. But werewolves that are from Texas don't belong in Georgia. Let me just say it that way. I like my elected officials to be able to complete coherent sentences and have some qualifications for the job. This was an interesting, not just the last week. I mean, last month, frankly, I mean, let's go back, though I do want to say, from November 9th, which was the day after the general election, to December 6th, which was the runoff day of vote. In that, less than 30 days, 28 days, $81 million between the two campaigns, just in those 28 days, $81 million. And so then add the general to that, and then add the fact that Senator Warnock has now put his name forward for this Senate seat 5 times. First in the primary, and then 2 years ago, the general, and then the runoff for that general. And then because it was a short-term fill-in seat for 2 years, then again for this general, and then again for the primary. 5 times in the last 2 years that he's filled out things, submit his name, and put a campaign together to do this. And in that time, Trump and his allies have endorsed people who have failed to capture that Senate seat. And the other one that John Ossoff occupies. So he endorsed Kelly Loeffler, lost. Endorsed David Perdue, lost. Endorsed Herschel Walker, lost. That's 3 Senate seats in the last 2 years that this, I don't even want to call it the Republican Party, but this aspect of the Republican Party that still has a grip on it. This guy is not working for you. If there's any conservatives listening or watching, this guy doesn't have a good picker, and it's not working. And further, if you and this is the part I really want to talk about. If you look at the breakdown of the voters, and we ought to talk about Kemp and Stacey Abrams as well, because there's so much, to talk about in the Georgia elections in relationship to not just American politics, but America as a collective identity and consciousness, and where we need to go in terms of justice issues and multicultural understanding and all of that. So there's so many layers to get into. But when you look at the makeup of the electorate of the people who voted, and which is another important distinction, right? There's over 7 million eligible voters in the state of Georgia. Collectively in the runoff, and the number's pretty close in the general as well. About 3.5 million people voted. So that's half of the number of people eligible. So I think that's really important to frame, because we always talk about, 50% of the country thinks this and 50%, thinks that. And no, 50% of the people who are eligible to have a voice chose to make their voice heard. And then 50% of that 50% think this way and then think that way, right? And a whole other swath of 50% chose not to engage for whatever reason, and we don't have that data in front of us. So we tend to think and make these assumptions from the electorate that I think it's important, especially when we're talking about this dangerous white nationalist, anti-woke, however we want to frame it, this MAGA Republican energy as being somehow this big dominant energy in the country. It's 25% of us. It's a small number. It has had a grip and has swayed, it's had a bigger impact. But when we boil it down, it's not as big as we tend to frame it to be. Doesn't mean it's not important, but I just want to frame that. So back to look at the electorate, look at who voted for Walker and for Warnock. Walker only won in two categories: white men and white women. Every other category he lost in both elections. He lost the black male vote. He lost the black women vote. He lost the male and female Latino vote, Asian and other. And so what that tells the Republican Party in Georgia, and I think for the rest of the nation, because we are a canary in the coal mine, if you will, you cannot win. You cannot win unless you are building a multicultural platform, and you're making a pitch for and a platform that includes the issues that are diverse, that include multicultural experience, diversity, inclusivity. We talk about it all the time. Unless your platform looks like a multicultural tapestry that America is, you are not going to win. Yeah. You're just not. And so that other side is powerful. Walker pulled in 1.7 million votes. The gap that he won by in this last round, which, by the way, he won both rounds. And so let's talk about the fact that we have a 50% threshold runoff rule in Georgia. Let's talk about where that comes from, because it has racist origins. And so it's a vestige of this, terrible consciousness, anti-Black consciousness in our country, and it's still on the books here in Georgia. So that's fine. Let's play by the rules. We played by the rules. We've defeated them, twice now. But the gap is about 95, and I think when all the mail-ins and overseas votes and all that come in, it'll be over 100,000 votes. That 100,000 is almost the exact number matched to his victory in DeKalb County alone, which is about half of Atlanta. Atlanta's DeKalb County and Fulton County. So just DeKalb County alone, right, which he won by 92%, I think, makes the difference of the gap. So again, unless you are building a multicultural platform, if everything that you're doing is simply dependent on the perspective and the power of patriarchy and whiteness, that's not a winning ticket.
Yeah, I like that how you say that. It's not a winning ticket unless we're building a multicultural platform coalition.
Yep.
And yesterday I saw a clip. I'm forgetting the name now. White woman on the House floor, House of Representatives, and brought herself to tears at the thought of voting for the Marriage Equality Act that's now moving forward. Brought herself to tears at the thought that two people might love each other enough to make a lifelong commitment and just happen to be of the same gender.
Yeah,
it astounds me how this old rooted consciousness, and you hit it straight. It's white. It's that white player, that white superiority that says we create the rules and we're creating the rules that work for us. In this case, I think $81 million is an obscene amount of money that I'm sure there's plenty of good nonprofits and organizations in the Atlanta, all across Georgia.
Georgia.
A whole hell of a lot better with that kind of money.
Medicaid, healthcare, so many things that money and resource could be used. Yeah, I think when we talk about the power grip that is, still lording over us, but slowly dying and drifting away, although it's making a lot of rattling noises as it goes, is a combination of two things. It is whiteness. It is, which, by the way, is not skin tone. You know, you don't have to look like me to believe in whiteness. And I don't believe in whiteness, right? As it's not something I buy into, but which takes a conscious effort to divorce yourself from. Because if you look like me, then you're ingrained in it automatically, and so it takes a conscious, awake effort to divorce yourself of those ideas and assumptions and behaviors and beliefs. But there are people of color who ascribe to the powers and the privileges of whiteness, and there are examples of that in political office. They tried to make Walker one of those, but there are other good examples. One of them sits on the Supreme Court, and Candace Owens and others. The senator from, I think, Alabama, Scott, last name Scott, Chris Scott, I think is his name, African American conservative. There are others. But it's whiteness and it's patriarchy. It's maleness, right? It's not maleness. Let's say patriarchy, because again, you don't have to be genetically male or identify as a male to believe in and to lend your consciousness to the ideals of patriarchy. Plenty of white women do that. The white women supporters of Trump, that's what they're doing. They believe in patriarchy. So it is the consciousness of patriarchy and whiteness, and where that Venn diagram comes together, that has been the grip on this country of power and privilege from its founding. But again, you look at the electorate, look at what's happening in the metro areas and all across California and the East Coast, Oregon, Washington, et cetera. And frankly, every major metro area, whiteness alone is not enough to get you to victory. You might win a primary, but you're not going to. And they know that. They see that. They see the trends. There are people who study this and spend a lot more time on this than I do, or you do. And they see the trends. They see where it's going. And that's what they're really upset about. And I think we, as ministers and as a awakened spiritual movement, we have to talk about it, and we have to talk about it more. We have this identity crisis within our own. And we're just talking shit here, so let's really get into it. We like to be nice. We love to be nice. We love to make nice with everybody. We love to say we don't talk about politics here. We don't go there. We don't. But then, we do support marriage equality, and we do, there's some things that have broad acceptance in our movement. And so we have this, kind of bipolar thing. It's like, well, are you in or are you not? Like we're in when it's popular and it doesn't look like it'll ruffle too many feathers. Right. But if it's going to be a little dicey and whatever, then, oh no, we gotta stay neutral. And I was in a dialogue with some of my colleagues on our listserv recently. I won't name names, but because it's not relevant. But somebody said, well, yeah, I don't speak politics. I don't take positions. I'm very careful, and I've told my community. And there were several people who had this perspective. I've stood in front of my community and said, I don't do this. And one of them, was the way that they phrased it, and what I heard as a father of Black children, as a man in an interracial marriage, and as a minister who has trans folks and Latins and African Americans and a whole spectrum of diversity within our community. What I heard when I read that comment was, I don't go here, I don't speak, I don't take sides. What I heard was, you won't stand up for me.
Right.
You won't stand up for me.
Yep.
Now I know this particular person, and I know that they love me, and I know that they would stand up for me. I happen to know that because I have a relationship with this person, right? But if you're saying that from your pulpit, and somebody of color is visiting you for the first time, or a trans person, or LGBT folk, or somebody who has one of those individuals in their family, and you make that statement, and you think you're appealing, and everybody's going to applaud for you, and maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what your collective community wants you to say. But what you have said to the diverse person, whatever form that may take, that's either watching you online or trying you out for the first time, is you have silently told them, I will not stand for you because it's too risky and it might offend my top contributors. And I think that I'm just going to call it out what it is. I think that is dangerous. I think it's hypocritical.
Yep.
I think it's pathetic. I think it's wrong. I think it's immoral to do that. Now, I can't dictate what other ministers do in their pulpits in our movement. Everybody's got to make your own choices, and I get that it's hard. I get that we have churches that are in very purple states, and maybe have congregations that are split right down the middle in terms of political identity. But this is not about politics. It's about human dignity. And social justice and speaking for justice issues isn't about political affiliation. I don't care if what I say on Sunday offends your political disposition. I don't care. Because if it does, then take it up with your political disposition, not with me.
Right.
Because I'm going to speak for justice issues, and those might fall on the left side of the aisle or the right side of the aisle today, and 10 years from now might flip, or 50 years ago might have been on different. So I'm not concerned about what side of the political spectrum what I'm speaking about and how I'm applying our principles to real issues of the day. I'm not concerned about what side of the aisle they fall on, because that could change over time.
Right.
I'm only concerned that it's a matter of human dignity.
Yeah.
And I think we need more of that prophetic courage coming from our pulpits, because I think to not do so, again, is dangerous and offensive to the diverse community that we say we want to be in creating a world that works for all.
Yeah. Wow. All right, folks. If you're sitting where I am, you're going to rewind that last few minutes and hit that part again. So when this goes into the archives, make sure you check that part out again. Share it with your family and friends, because this is important. And you hit on something in there. You hit on a lot of things in there that we could chat about. A couple that really come up for me, and that is that, and I've said it too, I agree with you. I think we try to be so inclusive of absolutely everybody, and that's not a bad thing, but we do it in a way that does tell others, yeah, well, you're welcome here, you can be included here, but don't expect me to go to bat for you. Yeah. Because and in many ways, I think it really does come back to that place, because we're afraid to offend somebody's. We're afraid somebody's going to take their money and go away. That's
the bottom line. It's the codependent relationship that ministers are in. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing, right? And those concerns are real. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I've got a family. I've got a house. I've got a mortgage. I've got a kid going to go to college, and another one starting first grade. So I not only need to do this and be successful at it, I need to do it for the next 20, 30 years. So I get it. But I'm not willing to compromise on principles of human dignity. And I think that our teaching has something to say about that in a very powerful and real and impactful way that will help the division that we feel, that will help the tension and the fear that people have. But we got to be courageous in speaking it. And it might mean that some people have to step out for a minute because it's not the new thought that they're used to. I'm okay with that. I really am.
Cool. All right. So before we run out of time, and we often go a little long on this program anyway. So
we're running out of time already?
Just about, yeah.
Just getting warmed up.
You threw a term in there, and I want to highlight it, because I think you're already speaking to the future of New Thought here. You use the term prophetic courage.
Yeah.
And it leads us to that idea of prophetic New Thought. And this is I've only seen a few places where this term's been used in writing, and people are just now trying to really, I think, grasp what this means. Help us understand that a little bit more. What is this emerging concept we're calling prophetic new thought from your perspective?
Yeah, to me, it's, from the beginning of my ministry in the pulpit, which is, 17 going on 18 years now, I've always talked about the radical implication of our teaching, right? What's the radical implication? Let's take the principle of oneness. We believe in oneness. Okay, there's no argument there across the board. What's the radical implication of that? We believe in prosperity. What's the radical implication of that? We believe in wholeness. What's the radical implication of that on the collective level? So, the voice of the prophetic in the Hebrew tradition is to be the voice that stands in the gap, and the gap is between God's vision for the world, however you want to, phrase and articulate that, and the lived experience in the right now. And that between those two places, so the right now reality and God's vision for what's possible or what God desires, depending on what tradition you're speaking from, Jewish, Christian, whatever, that, is articulated slightly differently. But between those two things, there's a gap. And that's the first place that we had to start in understanding that in New Thought, is because we like to just be in the vision and be in the possible and think affirmatively and state it in the now, and so it is, and it's all done. And that's wonderful. That's one of our tools. That's one of our practices. I'm, not abandoning that at all. But there's a gap between that and today's felt reality. And so for New Thought, the first thing we have to do is wrestle with that. There is a gap. Currently, the world does not work for everyone.
Right.
And I know ministers who say, but the world does work for everyone according to their consciousness. That is bullshit. That is complete crap. That is a stinking pile of theological privilege is what that is. And so,
write that one down.
We first have to wrestle with the gap. There's a gap. And when and then we see that the voice of the prophetic stands in that gap. And what it does is two things. It calls to account the people in current reality, whoever are the powers and principalities. It calls them to account. And it says, you all are responsible for creating this vision. Step up, enact more justice, help the poor, step up. Enact laws and create space in which God's justice is felt more equitably across the board. That's the voice of the prophetic. And it doesn't pick sides. It's not about liberal or conservative. It's the voice that does that. And whoever needs to hear that is who needs to hear that. And by far, throughout my life, Democrats have come up short plenty of times in lots of ways. And so, we tend to think, oh, liberal conservative, forget that. Just forget that. What is the voice of the prophetic that needs to say, step up and create more equity? You're the ones in charge of that. And then it continues. So it does that. And then it continues to call the vision forward. It continues to say, this is possible. A world of justice is possible. A world of peace is possible. A world of health and wholeness is possible. So it's doing those two things. And we do that part really well. We don't do the calling people up, well at the community level. And we do that because we're wrapped into an individualistic consciousness that says me and mine, which I think is a violation of the principle of oneness. It can't just be about you and your consciousness if we truly believe in oneness, because oneness connects us with everything. So that's that. When I was at the INTA conference in Chicago, I did a whole thing on New Thought as a liberation theology. You have access to that video, so maybe you can point people where to get it. But I kind of break it down into the salient points of what liberation theology is and how New Thought really can begin to see itself in that light and act in that way. And I think that's what we have to do. And I think it begins with, I think I mentioned this as a guest, as a commenter on one of your shows with Tracy Brown. We got to start reading in ministerial school. We got to start reading James Cone. We got to start reading Cornel West. We got to read more of Dr. King and Malcolm X. We got to read some of these liberation theology texts and learn how to apply them. We got to read James Baldwin. We need to change from just reading, all of these dead white men who synthesized a multinational, multicultural, blend of spiritual wisdom from India and from native traditions and from Africa, and we call them. We only acknowledge the white male voices of New Thought. They got it from a very diverse, atmosphere. Even if they pulled it down in their consciousness, what they were pulling down was ancient and came from across the world. So we need to expand our reading list and really understand how our principles can apply through that consciousness.
Yeah, amen. I was reflecting on exactly this recently, that I love the education I received. My ministerial education, It was rich and it felt diverse at the time, and it prepared me incredibly well for a reality that no longer exists. It prepared me to be a white male dominant, a patriarchal pulpit minister. And it did that incredibly well, but that reality just isn't available anymore. We've gone beyond that, and we're now stepping into these newer ideas. I want to give a quick shout out to our brother Raymond Anderson. Raymond, we've got a few comments here, but they're all blank. Unfortunately, I'm not sure what's happening. Either that, or you've fallen asleep on your enter.
It would be the first time I put someone to sleep.
But I know that Raymond, we want to have Raymond back on this program again soon, because there he is. Okay, you're here. Good. Because I think he also shares a lot with us on that. Our good friend Lori Carlson is also saying thank you. It's an important and relevant discussion this morning. I love expanding our reading list and recognizing the true ancestry of our teaching. Exactly. We can talk it all we want, but unless we walk the walk, but talk is just talk. And
I say start with the reading list because it will shift the consciousness and how you see how the teaching can be applied. When you read James Cone, he's a Christian and he's responding to the Malcolm X's and the Black power movement that are saying Christianity is irrelevant to the Black community because it doesn't help us at all. It doesn't empower us. It doesn't serve us. And he, as a Christian theologian, is responding to that, saying, well, but maybe it does if we view it from this angle. And so I think we need to have that same kind of critical thinking about our teaching, and those texts will help you. And you begin to see the path and say, oh, yeah, we really do belong in the radical justice applying atmosphere. It doesn't leave out the personal work. It doesn't leave out the personal consciousness. All of our tools are still included, but it adds this element that frankly has always been there. Right? The other thing, when we do that, we'll discover and acknowledge that the early authors, the Emersons and whatnot, were social justice radicalists. They believed in an equity applied across the board in the social sector. They weren't just all about gazing at their navels. They did a lot of that too. They were men of privilege for sure, but they understood how what they were pulling down and what they were discussing could be applied at the collective level.
Yeah. Wow, folks, if you wonder what you stumbled into, this is Ministers Talking Shit, and it happens every Friday morning at 7 a.m. My guest today has been Reverend Dr. David Alexander. We're going to take just a 30-second break to say thank you to our sponsors and contributing members. Give Dr. David a chance to take a sip of water, and we're going to come right back with our final thoughts for today's program. No water, coffee. Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back. More coming in just a minute.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network. Come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.
right. Thank you for being with us today, folks. I would say, Dr. David, that you made a splash on that last one, especially with Reverend Raymond. We've got on target, yeah, Black Power on target, boom, 100%.
I love it.
And a smile for your coffee cup.
Oh, there you go. Very good.
Linda, thanks for being with us here today. Brother Wayne, glad you're with us as well. Fiona, thank you for watching all the way on the other side of the planet.
Wonderful.
Folks, we do this every Friday morning. We'll be back again next week with more of Ministers Talking Shit. Dr. David, I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime, and we'll make sure Rev Z's not traveling the next time.
Oh, awesome. I would love it anytime. Love to be here. Love you guys.
Right on. Folks, thanks for being with us. Stay tuned to New Thought Media Network. Up next is Be Your Own Hero with Sekou Wrights. Morning prayer start at 8:15. The morning sip with Rev Melissa is at 8:30. 40 Days of Love with Emma Moreno at 9 o'clock. Remember, that's a dual language program, half in Spanish, half in English. Our regular programming throughout the day. Lindsay Leinbach is with us. The Joy Show with Rev B is at 1 o'clock. I'll be back with the good news at 5, and Pastor Michael with the Fireside Chat at 6. Until we see you again, wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.
And thanks for listening to this week's episode of Ministers Talking. We'll be back again next week with more commentary on current affairs, world events, and any other our ministers want to talk about. And if you found value here, please share our with your friends. Until next time, peace and blessings.